What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I am back with yet another album review, and one that I would say is probably one of the most anticipated albums this week. This band hit kind of an explosion of popularity with their first two albums, and they're back with the third one, and I was really curious about this one because I loved the last two. So today we're going over the latest offering from Blackbraid III. They're definitely more creative with song titles than they are with album titles. Anyway, this was independently released on the 8th of August. This band formed in 2022 in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. This is obviously their third album overall, and this is one of those where I feel like saying there is kind of weird because this is a one-man project essentially. We reviewed their second album, Blackbraid II. Obviously, I enjoyed it so much that it was on my year-end list, and I also ended up getting a copy of their first album as well, which it's Blackbraid 1, in case you were wondering. John and I got to catch their tour with Wolves of the Throne Room in Detroit, I think around the same time. They were absolutely amazing live, and for those that don't know, this is, again, a one-man Native American-themed black metal act. The one man in question, and forgive me, I'm going to try to pronounce this, I probably screwed up in the first review too, Sagagahawasa. Yeah, probably not even close. I'm sorry. Anyway, he plays pretty much everything on here except for drums, which are handled by Neil Schneider, who also does production, and he's done both drums and production on all three releases so far. This is very dynamic and themic black metal. It has elements that kind of go across, the black metal spectrum, but for the most part, this is very dynamic, very centered on riffs and big melodies, huge tremolo harmonies. Once you get past the intro, Dusk Eulogy, which really does set up the album pretty well, you have some beautiful acoustic passages. You can hear a fire crackling in the background. It's very attuned with nature, which this is the theme throughout this entire album with acoustic guitars and, just soundscapes of nature. But it sets up the vibe, the feel, that gives this album a setting. But that goes right into the true opening track here, War Drums at the Dawn on the Day of My Death. That song kicks down the door with machine gun riffs, kind of like an old school bomb blast beat, big lush tremolo harmonies, scathing vocals. It sounds evil and sinister, but this band does a great job with melody. At no point on here do I feel like any song is bereft of any melody. Like there's no point in here where it goes full bore into the dissonance and just creates atmosphere and, it sounds like they're hitting any note. Every riff, every harmony, every lead on here has like a purpose in terms of like reinforcing the big melodic hooks on here. And melody is utilized in a lot of different aspects in here. At times it sounds soaring and bright, other times more dark and sinister, sometimes more melancholic and reflective. A lot of this reminds me of Dissection. Dissection in terms of like melodic black metal, in terms of like their riff construction and just song construction in general. There's a lot of stuff on here in terms of like dynamics, in terms of like peaks and valleys in the songs that reminds me of Dissection. Also on that list, I would say Sacramentum, Immortal, Winter Phylith, and even like a little bit of Necrophobic here and there. Riff work on here is not entirely just in the black metal realm. There's stuff that goes a little bit outside and kind of like draws its inspiration from different camps. And he became the Burning Stars. There's definitely some like more like anthemic mellow death riffs on there. Like not like full bore like Amon Amarth, Viking Stomps or anything like that, but stuff that you would associate with bands like Hypocrisy. There's even like some syncopated heavy chuggy riffs and a breakdown on there that really does sound a lot like Hypocrisy. The Dying Breath of a Sacred Stag, that one has old school heavy metal licks all over it. It's got this big anthemic vibe to it. The riffs, it has, again, like a black metal sort of like veneer over it, but you kind of dig a little bit past that. You can hear like old school Judas Priest and a little bit of Iron Maiden there too. It's a good mid-tempo stomp for most of the song. There's big epic melodies. There's some like chuggy, good stomping riffs. Towards the end of the song, it goes full bore into blast beats and really kind of like gets a big second wave sort of bite to it. But I love the fact that, this band likes to revisit riffs a lot, especially bookending. A lot of the longer songs on here, which there are 2 tracks in here over 9 minutes and 1 over 7. If you like how a song opened, there's a good chance you're going to hear that riff again. And spoiler alert, I think they set up these songs really well, whether it's like an acoustic melody to start off or a little bit of like ambience, or they just go full bore into the main riff. there's a good chance you're going to hear that bookended towards the end, and then hear them add to it a little bit more with like some more harmonies, or even like, you know, like a shreddy, old school heavy metal lead. I believe on the last one, they had a lot of the leads done by another player who I should have probably wrote down his name, but I didn't. All the guitar work in here is done by the main guy whose name I can't pronounce. I'm just not going to try it again because that was difficult. But I'll talk about the leads here in a little bit because I want to talk about, again, song structure and a lot of these big dynamic songs. Tears at Dawn might be my personal favorite track on here. This one has a lot of that second wave black metal quality, even like some first wave, like kind of like Bathory worship in there too. It's blastier. It's a little bit colder and a little bit more evil sounding when it starts off, but this song has so many cool peaks and valleys. It gets very melancholic and reflective at certain points. You get these very hollow, just very sad melodies that come up, and then it gets just bright and triumphant. Amazing guitar harmonies throughout that entire song. And the song is over 9 minutes long, and at no point did I feel like it drew out parts too much. The transitions came when they needed to come. The riff changes in particular I thought were excellent. I like how it started out very just cold and vicious, again, like old school second wave stuff like Satyricon and fucking Mayhem and shit like that, but then it slows down and gets a little bit more dreary and a little bit more ominous sounding. And the vocals on that song sound particularly ghoulish too. It kind of just reinforces, again, all that second wave coldness and evilness. Maybe not quite as much as the opening of God of Black Blood, which sounds like they kind of caught the dude in a vocal warm-up, like he's just going, like kind of just getting ready to, I don't know, puke black blood all over the song. Sounds like he kind of did. It's a more like mid-tempo sort of stomp, like think, I don't know, Immortal and the song Tyrants. Like it's almost kind of more that pace, maybe a little bit faster. Heavy strummed riffs, and there's not a lot of riff changes on that song, but it's what they do on top of those riffs that I thought were really interesting. You get a flute melody that shows up on top of it, which I think is really cool. It kind of works as like a good lead melody. And I would assume it's probably a more traditional instrument that probably has a really cool name that I probably couldn't say anyway. Either way, it works really well. It kind of gives the song like a little bit more depth, and it adds, again, their token atmosphere, which the atmosphere in here is very fitting. Like, it feels like every song on here has a particular setting. Plus, if you did what I did and watched the whole live stream on YouTube yesterday and today, it has some scenic backgrounds behind the album, which, I don't know, it kind of like mentally reinforced like the setting of the album in general. Rolling mountains, forests, babbling brooks, campfires, animal sounds. I mean, there's points in there I think I heard like wolf calls, birds, maybe like an elk doing an elk call. Wendigo, maybe? Not ruling it out. But yeah, much like the last two albums, atmosphere plays a big part. And this one, I feel like it kind of saves a lot of the atmospheric elements for its instrumental tracks, or I guess you could call them interludes or transitional tracks. Dusk, the earth is weeping, traversing the forest of eternal dusk, and like wind through the reeds, making waves like water. Most of these, I feel like, serve a purpose in terms of, like, again, reinforcing the setting. You know, they are more about the atmosphere. They're also probably the most, like, rustic and intimate songs on here because a lot of them are just acoustic passages, which the acoustic play on here is beautiful. You don't get as much of that in the songs themselves as you did maybe on the previous albums. There's definitely a couple of like clean breaks to kind of build up the song and kind of get down to like, you know, that last epic riff or transition into like a giant sized bridge. But for the most part, all the acoustic stuff is saved for these instrumentals. And for the most part, I think they're pretty good. Dusk, the earth is weeping, and like wind through the... I'm not saying that entire title again. These three songs are more... I don't know, I feel like about the setting, like, you know, there's a really good acoustic play on there. You get some, like, acoustic harmonies, the soundscapes in the background, whether it's, like, again, you know, babbling brooks and running water, or, like, a crackling fire or animal calls. Those three songs do a good job of, like, just, again, like, reinforcing the setting. A lot of it kind of sounds like what I think you would hear if you were, like, falling asleep after a long day at Fire in the Mountains. Someone strumming on an acoustic guitar over a campfire, the sounds of nature in the background. Actually, it's quite soothing. But the one that really stood out to me was Traversing the Forest of Eternal Dusk. This one I feel like is a little bit more about composition than it is about the atmosphere. You have, pretty much what all of them do, a beautiful acoustic melody, but it continues to really build on it. The melody shifts around a little bit. There's a little bit more I would say classical play on the guitar. And then it has this really awesome, flat out, classic heavy metal lead that comes in. It's kind of shreddy, but very melodic. I think there's a little bit of tapping on it. It feels like a nod to just classic heavy metal rather than being in tune with nature and such. And that brings me back to the leads. I like the leads on here. Generally, they're very short. There's not as many of them as there were, I would say, on the last album. But I will say that not all the leads fit as well. I feel like he kind of goes for the shreddy, kind of heavy metal lead a little bit too much, and they don't necessarily always fit the vibe of the song, whether it's a little bit more evil sounding or a little bit more atmospheric or just a flat out riffy banger. I mean, all right, it fits with the riffy bangers a little bit more, but I feel like the leads kind of have one particular gear versus the songs being way more dynamic and way more far reaching as far as the different melodies they explore and such. Production wise, I think this is really solid once again. I don't know if I like the drum sound as much on this album as I did on the previous album, but overall it sounds rich, it sounds full. Everything is separated really well. Nothing gets too muddy on here. The vocals are nice and out in front. And this does have a really cool extra with the last song, Fleshbound, which is a Lord Belial cover, which is why I wore the shirt. And this song serves as a reminder for me to actually listen to more to Lord Belial because I'd never heard this song before. I jammed the original, compared the two, absolutely nailed it. And I like the fact that he picked a song that honestly complements the album. It doesn't feel like a little extra song on there. The song has a very similar vibe to a lot of the stuff on, the entire album. It has a big melodic presence. I love the cold, distant harmonies in there, but it's very, very tuneful. And again, I need to listen to more Lord Belial. Outside of the leads being kind of a universal fit, my only other gripe on here is I do feel like they overdo the amount of interludes on here. Some of them I felt could have just been part of a longer song overall, or even cooler, a big dropout in the middle of a song to kind of build back the energy again. They're all really well done. The acoustic play on here is as good as, any of the other guitar work in here. I just feel like some of them, they didn't really go much of anywhere. The Earth is Weeping in particular, I feel like is kind of the same strum melody over, again, lots of nature sounds and animal calls. It's effective in terms of the setting, but in terms of the melody being particularly memorable, not as much. But outside of that, I really dig this album. I don't know if it's as good as the second one though, but this is a good way to cap off a trilogy of albums here. And honestly, weirdly enough, the first thing I thought of was in terms of how this trilogy runs, I kind of compared this a little bit to the OG trilogy for Star Wars. First one's awesome. Second one, God tier. Empire's one of my favorite movies all time. And this one is kind of Return of the Jedi one. It's big, it's bold, it's dynamic as hell, but I feel like the second one was a little bit more gripping. So overall, I'm going to give this a solid 4 stars. I think this is a killer album overall. Huge dissection vibes. That will win me over all the time. Lots of clever riff changes. The songwriting here in particular is what really draws me in. I love how dynamic these songs are, especially the longer songs. Those near 10-minute songs do not skimp on anything. Great hooks, great melodies, riffs for fucking days on here. I would say this album is as riffy as if any of my favorite Immortal albums. And there's a lot of variety in terms of the riffs. Again, there's a little bit of melodeath here and there. You get a lot of second wave stuff. There's some good anthemic old school heavy metal too. There's even some thrashier moments. This is a well put together, solid fucking album. And while at this point I'm not sure if I like it as much as Blackbraid II, this is still just, again, a flat out incredible album. If you're a big fan of Dissection, Winter Phylith, I'd say Panopticon to a degree too, check this album out. I know this band gets a tremendous amount of hype, but honestly, believe the hype. I think this band lives up to every bit of hype that I've heard about them. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and a lone perk is doing a members-only live stream, which might happen here relatively soon. John is officially going to be off of his 7-week stretch of overtime. And that means we'll be able to do the members only live streams and be able to finally get down to some bigger videos that we've been meaning to shoot, but we just haven't had the chance to. Either way, membership's the main way to support the channel, and there's a join button down there, and you can just smash the shit out of it, and we would appreciate the shit out of that. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. It means the world to us. August looks like it won't be as barren as July was, thankfully, in terms of new releases. And of course, you know, now that John is freed from the shackles of his gainful employment, I guess, you know, he got paid for all that shit. We will be able to get down to some bigger videos, like namely some rankings and such. So we are looking forward to overloading you guys with more content. So one more big thank you, because you guys are fucking awesome, and we will catch you later.